3 more MLS teams were knocked out of the CONCACAF Champions League this week, leaving only the Philadelphia Union to compete with 3 Liga MX in the semi-finals. This is yet another failure in MLS's long-standing failure to win the CCL, and today we're here to talk about why. Hey guys, what's up? I'm Pete Douthit, host of the 11 Yanks show. We talk about all things USMNT. Hit subscribe if you're new here. We got new videos Wednesday and Sunday. Smash that like button. It helps other people to find us. Here we go. Every year, I get excited about CONCACAF Champions League because it's a chance for MLS to measure itself against other teams in the region. And every year, inevitably, I'm disappointed. Now, there's 2 main reasons that are often given as to why MLS cannot win CONCACAF Champions League. And those reasons are 1, the schedule, and 2, the spending. So I'm going to look at both of these reasons and see if either or both are valid reasons as to why MLS teams seem to struggle in CCL every year. I'm also going to look and see if there are any other reasons or any other factors that are hampering the league from being successful in this regional tournament. But first, a word from our sponsor. Hey guys, I'm happy to say that 11 Yanks has a new sponsor. OneFootball is an app that allows you to get all of your news, transfers, stats, and in-match updates from over 160 leagues in over 60 countries. I've been using this app for the last few weeks, and here's what I love about it. I can select the teams that I love, in this case the USMNT, and with one click, I'll have access to all the news about the teams, statistics from past games, lineups, information about future games, as well as who is part of the roster. I can also do the same thing for specific players, select the ones that I want to follow, and I'll be able to track that player's data, performance, and stats throughout the season for both club and country. So check out the app, guys, OneFootball. Click the link in the description below to download the app directly and start getting all the information you need about the players and teams that you love. Okay, the schedule. Now, one of the arguments that people make is that because MLS teams are still in preseason when CCL starts, they have a competitive disadvantage compared to Liga MX, whose league usually starts in January. Technically, CCL usually starts the same week as MLS kicks off, with the opening game of the season being a midweek CCL game, and then that weekend being the opening game of MLS. So technically, you could say that teams are still in, quote, preseason. But let's be realistic. 3 days before the season starts is not exactly preseason mode. The players are 100% fit and ready to play 90 minutes at a high level, and if they're not, then the coaching staff has not done their job. Furthermore, teams aren't getting knocked out in the second round. They generally win those games and make it on to the quarterfinals, where some teams get knocked out, quite a few usually, as we saw this week, and usually one makes it to the semifinal. Another way of saying this is that MLS teams usually get knocked out when they're playing the 5th game of the season, because there's 2 CCL games plus 3 MLS games before they play their first quarterfinal game. And the reality is they don't actually get knocked out until the 2nd leg, so you're talking about the 8th game of the season, because that's an extra CCL game, and then that weekend there's an MLS game before they then get knocked out the following weekend. So that's the 8th game of the season. That's almost 500 minutes of competitive soccer. If you're not fit or in form after playing 7 games of competitive soccer on top of the friendlies you played in preseason, that's not a scheduling issue. That's a coaching/fitness and conditioning issue. Now, the rhythm argument makes a little bit more sense to me because Liga MX teams have played 10 or 12 games at this point, where you have only played 5 or 6. But to me, that's somewhat of an intangible. There's no concrete proof that teams are better 12 games into the season than they are 6 games into the season. Some teams start really strong and then fade. Also, more games played increases the chance of fatigue and or injury before CCL starts for the Liga MX teams. So although there might be some small merit to the rhythm argument, I don't think it's enough to really have traction. In conclusion, I don't think that scheduling is really the issue. If you're not fit and in form 7 or 8 games into the season, that's not a scheduling problem. That's just basic incompetence. The second argument is simple. Liga MX teams spend more money on salaries than MLS teams do, and so that gives them a strong competitive advantage. Now, when evaluating that claim, the problem we have is that MLS releases its rosters, well, more specifically, the MLS Players Association releases salaries every year, so we know how much the teams are spending and how much the players are making. Liga MX officially does not release their salaries, and for very good reason. In Mexico, most players sign 2 contracts. They have the official contract that then gets sent to the league, and then they have a second contract that is just between them and their club, and that is a significantly higher salary. Players will literally receive some of their salary in giant bags of cash because a lot of teams in Liga MX are used as money laundering teams, so they want to play their players in cash. This is one of the reasons they don't release salary figures. I did speak to a source of mine who's actually played in Liga MX and has some knowledge about it, and he told me that the teams that spend the most in MLS would be somewhere in the lower middle end of Liga MX spending, and that the teams in Liga MX that spend the most on salaries would be double or triple what the elite teams in MLS spend on salaries. That right there is a massive, massive, massive disadvantage for MLS teams. But it goes further than that. Not only is there a salary cap in MLS, there is limitations on how they can spend their money. Because the MLS salary cap, which if you include GAM and TAM, is only about $9 million a year on your entire roster, MLS teams have the opportunity to sign 3 designated players who do not count against the salary cap and who can make almost as much as the team is willing to pay them. This means a team like Toronto can spend $9 million as a salary cap, but really spend closer to $25 million if you include their DP contracts. While these players help teams to be more competitive with Liga MX, it also means that MLS teams spending already considerably less than their counterparts in Mexico have the disadvantage of being imbalanced, with up to 70% of some teams' roster being spent on just 3 players. Now imagine if even one of those players is injured, banned, or just has an off day, that's 25% of your roster that is not performing on that day. Let's look at Toronto, for example. Their salary budget for 2019, and I don't have the 2020 figures, they were a little bit wonky because of COVID, so we're basing this on 2019, was $24.2 million. Josie Altidore made $6.3 million of that, Bradley made $6.4 million of that, and Alejandro Pozuelo made $3.8 million. That's a total of $16.5 million, or 66% of their salary budget spent on 3 players. This graphic here is from 2018, but it demonstrates how teams who want to be even slightly competitive with Liga MX, their only hope is to get 3 DPs. And while it closes the gap a little, the low salary cap with the restrictions on how you can spend, that you can only spend meaningfully on 3 players, stops teams from being truly competitive. Why won't MLS allow its teams to spend more? That is a complex and multifaceted question with complex, multifaceted answers. I'm going to recommend the Allocation Disorder podcast by Paul Tenorio and Sam Stagecall. Both of them work for The Athletic, and they cover this issue every single week with insight, nuance, thoughts, and really good, solid information on why MLS is so intent on being mired in its own mediocrity. They understand this issue so much better than I do, and they have the ears of GMs and people in the league who I don't have access to, and they do a really great job. Highly recommend. Go find the Allocation Disorder podcast. It's part of the Total Soccer Show podcast network, and they will tell you everything you need to know about this. What I'm going to postulate is the idea that if MLS doesn't want to spend more, or it only wants to very incrementally increase spending, here is a way that I think MLS can be more competitive in CCL without necessarily increasing spending. Let's take a look at what the top 5 teams spent on salaries in 2019. Toronto FC, $24.2 million. The Galaxy, $19.6 million. Kinda shocking for how bad they were. Chicago Fire, $17.1 million. That is a terrible, whoever's running that franchise needs to be fired ASAP, because it is ridiculous that they're spending the kind of money they're spending and still being one of the worst teams in the league. LAFC and Seattle Sounders managed to do more with less because their spending isn't quite up there with guys like LA Galaxy and Toronto. But my point is that if you took the ceiling of salary budget spending, which is Toronto FC, is about $25 million. What if we took away all the restrictions on spending, okay? Take what Toronto is spending right now, that's the ceiling, make that the new salary cap, but allow teams to spend it however they want. That means no DPs, no GAM, no TAM, no young money, none of these ridiculous restrictions that force teams to concentrate quality into 2 or 3 positions on the field and forces them to operate with low quality players in so many positions on the field. Without these restrictions, most well-run teams with good GMs would maybe get 2 or 3 guys that you spend 2 to 3 million on every year, and then get 7 or 8 guys who you're spending 1 to 1.5 million on every year. And now your quality is balanced throughout the entire roster or throughout the field instead of focused so heavily on just 2 or 3 players. MLS GMs are smart. They're big boys. They don't need to be stuck with all of these crazy restrictions. Raise that salary cap to 25 million and allow teams the freedom to spend it on how they see fit. Now, in doing that, you would also have to raise the salary floor because there are teams like Colorado, Vancouver, Houston, Dallas, and the New York Red Bulls who all spend between 8 to 10 million a year on salaries. You would have to bring the cap floor higher to 12 to 14 million a year to force teams to be more competitive and also to preserve the parity that the league has built its whole status on. You would still be behind Liga MX in spending, but your rosters would be more balanced, making you more competitive on the day when it matters in a knockout tournament in CCL. That's just my idea, and I think it could work. Go listen to Allocation Disorder, and you'll find out why the league is so intent on being stuck in its own mediocrity. All right, guys, I said that I would take some questions on this issue from you on Twitter, so here we go. First one is from ACAB. Why is MLS's schedule the way it is? Why can't we sync up with the other CONCACAF leagues or Europe? I admit I know very little about this, so maybe this is a silly question. So the excuse that's always been given by MLS is that you cannot play matches in cold weather, which is why we can't play from November through February. To a degree, I understand that, but also to another degree, I don't. The other thing is that I don't think MLS wants to compete with the NFL schedule, which runs during that time, and I think they'd rather have most of their games played during the summer when there aren't a lot of other competing leagues in this country. That being said, if we wanted to be more competitive in CCL, we could move the league back to start the first week of February. If it's still cold weather in the northern parts of the United States, just have the first 3 or 4 games be played in the southernmost hemisphere. We have enough teams in the southernmost part of the United States that you could easily have the teams from colder climates be playing down south, and I don't think it would be an issue. Okay, from USMNT Universe. Do you think MLS needs to find better qualifications into CCL? I don't know, but it seems like CCL qualifications doesn't allow the best teams to get in. I think both conference champions should be in over the US Open Cup, for example. Okay, so it's been a little bit wonky over the last few years, partially because of COVID and partially because there's been a rejigging of the CONCACAF format. But I believe in 2022, the 4 American teams that are going to go in are the US Open Cup winner, the MLS Cup winner, the Supporter Shield winner, and the winner of either the West or Eastern Conference that's on the opposite side of the Supporter Shield. So let's say if Seattle wins the Supporter Shield, and the other team that go in would be the winner of the Eastern Conference, if that makes sense. I think those are perfectly fine parameters because it's a good balance between teams that have been successful over the course of the season, the conference winners, and also teams that have done well in the knockout tournaments, MLS Cup, and US Open Cup. From Tactical Manager. I believe all play a role, but which below do you think is where this is the biggest gap between MLS and Liga MX? A. Tactically, B. Technical ability, C. Mentality, and D. Qualification method. I think the biggest one is technical. Money pays good technical players. That's why, generally speaking, the DPs are all very technical players. We're very behind on technique. You look at most MLS teams, and there's 5 to 6 guys maximum who are technically proficient, and they're surrounded by a lot of athletes. Whereas when you watch Liga MX, everybody has a technical floor that is so high, and that makes a massive, massive difference. So I think it's technique. I don't think tactics is a huge issue. We have good coaches here. I think maybe mentality is a little bit a part of it. Generally speaking, I think the mentality can improve, but I don't think it's the biggest issue. I think the biggest issue is technical. From Otis Lyons, would the 24-team Club World Cup be enough to encourage MLS teams to prioritize CCL? So I actually think that MLS teams are prioritizing CCL now, okay? They're playing their starting lineups in these games. In the past, they didn't always do that. But over the last 3 to 4 years, and it kind of started with Toronto showing that a team could make it to the final in 2018, and ever since then, we've seen teams start to take CCL quite seriously. Again, the issues that we've discussed are the disparity in spending. And that disparity in spending isn't going away because they just signed a new CBA that's going to go to 2027. So the clear answer is no. Going to the Club World Cup isn't going to incentivize MLS to spend more. It just isn't. It should, but it isn't. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Tell me what you think about this issue in the comments, and how long will it be before an MLS team actually wins CCL? You guys are awesome, and I will talk to you on Wednesday.